But first, another day, another prime ministerial overseas trip, this time to the Pacific Islands Forum at Rarotonga in the Cook Islands. Now, I accept that PMs have to travel because Australia's voice should be heard in the world's main forums, and only the Prime Minister can do that. And the one thing that can't change is Australia's geography. So it will always take longer for our Prime Minister to get to all the important meetings than a PM in perhaps, say, the Northern Hemisphere. But frankly, the China trip over the last few days was an indulgence, more about Anthony Albanese paying homage to Gough Whitlam than Australia's national interest. He didn't need to go for us to do $200 billion worth of trade with China. That happens because Beijing needs our resources, not because China likes us or Anthony Albanese. And any trade gains from boycotts dropped, well, they'll be reversed as soon as Beijing next wants to punish us, which could be any time, given our continuing and essential strategic partnership with the United States. If anything, Albanese's China trip just sent confusing signals to the Americans. We might be putting short-term economic gain ahead of long-term national security, and to Australian business that China might again be a secure market, when we must have learned by now that the communist regime treats trade as politics by another means, to be turned on and off like a tap. Even though the new Kiwi PM is not going to the Pacific Islands Forum, where the PM is tonight, this really is one of the events that Australia should attend. Indeed, it's the one international gathering where Australia is the undisputed superpower. And it matters more now than ever before in the struggle with China for influence and authority in our backyard. But consider the optics. We're at the Pacific Islander Forum to plead with our neighbours not to get seduced by China, not to take their billions in debt-trapped diplomacy, not to be suckered in by their power and their promises. Yet isn't that just what we've done as our PM toured Beijing? Rather than lobby against China, though, what Albanese wants to do with this Pacific visit is get their votes to ensure that he gets to host the next big UN climate conference here in Australia. Now, I kid you not, that's his main objective. So my issue with all this prime ministerial travel is less that it's excessive, but that more that it seems to substitute for hard work behind the desk by the PM and his government, and that these trips are sometimes linked to governmental objectives which are damaging our long-term well-being as a nation. Under Labor, we're already wrecking our energy security in the name of reducing emissions, supposedly to save the planet. We're already jeopardising our export income, $200 billion plus, of which comes from selling gas and coal to countries that don't have our emissions obsession. To save the planet, we're starting to put extra burdens and restrictions on our agricultural sector too, which is our next most important way to pay our way in the world and have money in our budget to fund Medicare, pay for schools, build hospitals, the NDIS and more. And in order to get the micro-states of the Pacific support for Australia to host a future Conference of the Parties or COP climate jamboree here, we're likely to have to make even more onerous climate commitments, including promises to phase out fossil fuel use and exports. In other words, more economic self-harm in pursuit of dubious environmental benefits, given that China and India have not the slightest intention of putting emissions reduction ahead of economic development. Now, already, this is a government that seems to prefer symbolism to substance. And to get the symbolism it wants, it doesn't seem to care what collateral damage it does. My fear is that the PM is looking for another signature project now that the voice has failed, hence his push to host a meeting of COP. And in chasing this new vanity project, he could make all the wrong concessions in order to get it. He needed the people's vote, didn't he, to secure the voice and the good sense of the Australian public. They didn't give it to him. Unfortunately, this time round, he doesn't need a vote in order to get a COP meeting. Only an election can stop the economic damage a bad government can do, And unfortunately, the next one is still 18 months away.